The cowboy had been riding for days through the open land, where the sky stretched wide and the wind carried the smell of dust and sage. His horse moved slow, its hooves pressing into the dry earth, and the man in the saddle sat tall but quiet. People in small towns had seen him pass through before, but no one knew his full story. Some said he was running from the past. Others said he was just searching for a place where he could finally belong. His eyes carried both kindness and weariness, as though he had seen too much yet still hoped for something better ahead. When he reached the new town, the sun was setting, painting the sky in orange and gold. The place was small, just a few wooden houses, a saloon, a blacksmith shop, and a dusty street that children ran across. Folks sitting on porches looked up when they saw him. He gave a polite nod, tied his horse outside the inn, and stepped inside. The innkeeper greeted him warmly, offering a room and a meal. Though strangers often drew suspicion in such towns, something about the cowboy's calm presence made people lower their guard. He never boasted, never raised his voice, and always treated others with respect. That night, while eating stew by the fire, he overheard men talking about a nearby ranch where 3 sisters lived alone after their parents had passed. The men spoke with admiration, saying the sisters were not only beautiful but also strong enough to keep the ranch running on their own. The eldest, they said, was wise and carried herself like a leader. The middle sister was gentle, known for helping neighbors and caring for animals. The youngest was full of laughter, often seen racing her horse across the hills, fearless and wild. The cowboy listened quietly, but in his heart he felt a spark of curiosity. The next morning he offered his help to the ranch. Work was what he knew best, fixing fences, herding cattle, carrying heavy loads, and it was his way of repaying kindness to any community that gave him a place to rest. When he reached the ranch, he found the sisters busy with their chores. The eldest, wearing a wide-brimmed hat, gave him a steady look and asked who he was. He introduced himself simply, without telling too much of his past. She studied him for a moment before nodding. "If you can work, then work," she said. He joined them in the fields, repairing broken posts and guiding restless cattle back to the pen. The middle sister brought him water when the sun grew hot, smiling softly but saying little. The youngest laughed when he lifted a heavy gate with ease and teased him, "You're stronger than 2 men put together." The cowboy only smiled, wiping the sweat from his brow. He noticed how different they were, one serious, one gentle, one playful, yet they worked together with perfect balance, each filling in what the other lacked. Days turned into weeks, and the cowboy became part of their routine. He woke early with them, rode out into the pastures, and shared meals at the wooden table in their home. The eldest asked his opinion on matters of the ranch, slowly trusting his judgment. The middle sister found comfort in his quiet company, often sitting with him as they watched the sunset. The youngest challenged him to races, daring him to keep up with her laughter and speed. Without planning it, he found himself connected to each of them in a different way. But whispers began in town. People noticed how the cowboy spent time with the sisters. Some teased that he must choose one soon, while others warned him about the old tradition tied to their family. The townsfolk spoke of an ancient law, one that said a man could not take just one sister and leave the others behind. If his heart was truly bound to their family, he must marry all or none. At first, the cowboy thought it was only a story told for amusement. But when he saw how seriously the townsfolk spoke, he realized it was a matter deeply rooted in their culture. Still, he pushed the thought aside. He told himself that his feelings were only of friendship and respect, not love. Yet every evening as the fire crackled and the stars filled the sky, he found his heart unsettled. He admired the wisdom of the eldest, the kindness of the middle, and the joy of the youngest. How could one man's heart hold such feelings without breaking apart? He lay awake at night staring at the ceiling, wondering what destiny had brought him here and what choice he would have to make. The sisters, too, began to notice. The eldest caught him watching her with quiet admiration when she spoke with authority about the ranch. The middle felt a warmth when his hand brushed hers while passing a cup of water. The youngest teased him more than ever, but beneath her laughter she felt something she could not name. They were sisters, bound by blood and love, yet they each felt drawn to the same man. One evening, after a long day of herding, they all sat by the porch. The wind carried the smell of fresh hay and the sky turned purple with nightfall. The cowboy, leaning back on the railing, felt peace but also a heavy weight in his chest. The eldest spoke first, her voice calm but firm. "You know the stories, don't you? About our family?" He nodded, not sure what to say. The middle looked down at her hands while the youngest laughed nervously. "Cowboy," she said with a grin, "you can't choose just one of us. By ancient law, you must marry all sisters." Her words were playful yet serious at the same time. The cowboy looked at them, his heart pounding. He realized the path ahead would not be simple. Out here in the Wild West, traditions held the power to shape lives as much as love did. And in that quiet moment, as the stars shone above and the sisters waited for his answer, the cowboy knew his story was only beginning. The morning sun rose over the hills, and the cowboy found himself already awake, sitting by the window of the small room he had rented at the inn. He had barely slept. The words of the youngest sister echoed in his mind. "Cowboy, you can't choose just one of us. By ancient law, you must marry all sisters." At first he thought she was joking, but her serious eyes told him otherwise. He rubbed his hands across his face, wondering what kind of place he had ridden into, where love was not only about feelings but about family traditions older than anyone alive. Later that day, he saddled his horse and rode back to the ranch. The sisters were already working, feeding the chickens, gathering water, and mending a fence broken by a restless bull. He joined them without saying much, his strong hands lifting the heavy wood, his eyes meeting theirs only briefly. The eldest watched him carefully, as though she knew what he was thinking. The middle sister smiled kindly, trying to ease the tension. The youngest teased him as usual, laughing when he stumbled in the mud. Yet beneath the laughter, each of them felt the same unspoken question. What would he do about the ancient law? The law itself was not written on paper, but it lived in the hearts of the townsfolk. Long ago, when the land was still wild and dangerous, a family of sisters had once been divided by jealousy, when only one married a cowboy and the others were left behind. The bitterness tore the family apart and the ranch was lost to enemies. Since then, the ancestors swore that no sister should ever be separated by marriage. If one man's love touched one sister, he had to honor them all, keeping their bond safe. Whether the law was wise or foolish, no one in town dared break it. The cowboy listened to this story later that evening, when an old ranch hand sat with him by the corral. The man had white hair and a face carved by years of sun and wind. "Son," he said in a slow voice, "this isn't just about romance. It's about loyalty and family. Folks here believe that breaking the law will bring misfortune. You care for those girls, don't you?" The cowboy nodded quietly, not trusting himself to speak. The old man patted his shoulder. "Then you'll have to decide what kind of man you are. A man who runs from tradition, or one who finds a way to honor it." The next days tested him more than he expected. The eldest sister began to speak with him about serious matters: cattle prices, weather, the strength of the fences. She respected his judgment, and he admired her steady courage. The middle sister often sat with him when work was done, sharing stories of her childhood, her laughter soft as the evening breeze. She was gentle, and her kindness touched a part of him he had long buried. The youngest continued to race him on horseback, daring him to keep up with her wild energy. Her laughter reminded him of freedom, of days when life was not so heavy. He felt himself pulled in 3 directions at once. Each sister had a different place in his heart, and the thought of hurting one of them made his chest ache. One night, unable to sleep, he walked outside. The stars stretched across the sky like silver dust, and the land seemed endless. He whispered to himself, "How can a man choose? How can a man love without breaking something precious?" The town was beginning to talk more openly. At the saloon, men nudged one another, saying the cowboy would soon have to follow the law. Some laughed, imagining the challenge of such a life. Others frowned, saying no outsider should interfere with the tradition. Women in town watched the sisters carefully, worried that jealousy might grow between them. But to everyone's surprise, the sisters stood close together, never letting rivalry take root. They loved one another too deeply to let a man divide them, even a man they all admired. One afternoon, the cowboy found himself alone with the eldest sister as they repaired a section of the barn. She wiped sweat from her brow and looked at him steadily. "You're a good man," she said. "But do you understand what our family's law means?" He nodded, though he had no words to explain his thoughts. She leaned against the wooden beam, her voice softening. "We are sisters first. Nothing will ever change that. If you bring division among us, you will lose us all." Her words cut through him like truth laid bare. The very next day, the middle sister sat with him under a tree by the pasture. She had brought fresh bread, and together they ate in silence. Finally, she spoke in her gentle way. "I don't want you to feel trapped. I know our tradition is heavy, but love should not feel like a cage. It should feel like home." Her eyes met his, filled with kindness that made his heart ache. That evening, the youngest caught him near the well. She tossed her braid over her shoulder and laughed. "You're thinking too much, cowboy. Don't you see? This law isn't about fear. It's about keeping us together. We're not asking you to break yourself apart. We're asking you to be strong enough to hold us all." Her laughter faded, and for a moment her eyes shone with something more serious than her usual playfulness. The cowboy realized that each sister, in her own way, was telling him the same thing. This was not a matter of choosing one over the others. It was about respecting the bond they shared. Yet, could a man's heart truly carry such a weight? Could he be fair, loyal, and loving to all without favoring one? These questions haunted him as the days went by. The town council soon called a meeting. Rumors had grown too loud, and the elders wanted to address the matter openly. The cowboy stood before them, the three sisters at his side. People filled the small hall, whispering and waiting for his answer. One elder, with a long beard and stern eyes, spoke loudly. "Stranger, you have walked into a family bound by ancient law. You cannot take one and leave the others behind. Do you accept this law, or will you walk away?" The cowboy looked at the faces around him. The sisters standing close, the townsfolk watching with expectation, the old ranch hand giving him a nod of encouragement. His chest tightened, but his voice came out steady. "I have come to respect this land and its people. I have come to respect these sisters more than I can say. I do not yet know how I will walk this path, but I will not bring division among them." Gasps and murmurs filled the hall. Some smiled, some frowned, but the sisters exchanged looks of quiet relief. For the first time, the cowboy felt the weight of destiny settle on his shoulders. He had not given a full answer yet, but he had chosen not to run, and in the Wild West, staying was often the hardest choice of all. That night, as the town grew quiet, he lay awake under the wide sky. The ancient law was no longer just a story to him. It was his reality. He did not know what the future held, but he knew this. He could not turn away from the sisters, nor from the strange, powerful bond that tied them all together. And so his heart remained restless, caught between tradition, love, and the unknown road ahead. The cowboy woke up before dawn, his mind still heavy from the meeting at the town hall. The words of the elder kept echoing inside him. "You cannot take one and leave the others behind. Do you accept this law, or will you walk away?" He had stood firm and said he would not divide the sisters, but that promise weighed on him. The choice no longer felt like his alone. It was tied to the lives of the sisters, the town, and the very tradition that had shaped them. He stepped outside, and the sky was still dark. The air was cool, and a thin mist rolled across the open land. He saddled his horse quietly, letting the animal's soft breath calm his restless thoughts. He needed time alone to think, away from the watchful eyes of the town and the sisters. He rode out into the hills where the grass swayed gently and the horizon stretched wide. There, under the open sky, he asked himself questions no man could easily answer. Could he truly honor three women equally? Could he give them each the love they deserved without breaking one's heart? He did not know. But what he did know was that he respected them too much to cause harm. While he was gone, the sisters gathered in their kitchen. The eldest set down her cup of coffee, her face calm but thoughtful. "He is trying," she said quietly, "but this law has put a heavy burden on him." The middle sister nodded, her hands folded on the table. "He is kind," she whispered. "He never asked for this, but still he does not run away." The youngest leaned back in her chair, her eyes shining with both worry and defiance. "He'll figure it out," she said firmly. "He's stronger than he knows. But we must help him, not test him." The sisters knew that while the law demanded unity, it could easily turn into division if they let jealousy or rivalry take hold. They had seen it happen in old stories, and they promised themselves they would not let history repeat. So instead of competing for the cowboy's attention, they decided to stand together, to show him that they valued their bond as sisters above all. When the cowboy returned that evening, he found them waiting for him on the porch. The eldest spoke first. "We want you to understand something," she said, her voice steady. "This law is not meant to trap you. It is meant to protect us. but we do not wish for you to carry this alone." The middle sister added softly, "We will not fight among ourselves. We are sisters and nothing will break that." The youngest leaned forward with her usual fire. "And you, cowboy, must learn that love is not always about choosing. Sometimes it is about accepting what is greater than you." Her words struck him deeply. He realized that the sisters were not asking him to make an impossible choice. They were asking him to see love in a different way, not as a matter of division but as a bond that could hold them all together. It was a truth as wild and difficult as the land itself, but it began to settle inside him like a seed taking root. In the days that followed, life on the ranch carried on, but everything felt changed. The cowboy continued working hard, mending fences, guiding cattle, fixing the barn roof. But now every glance, every shared word with the sisters carried deeper meaning. The eldest trusted him more, asking his advice not just on ranch work but on matters of the town. The middle sister began sharing her dreams, telling him how she wanted to see the ranch grow and help their neighbors. The youngest dragged him into her games and races, making him laugh even when his mind was heavy. The townsfolk watched closely, some with curiosity, others with suspicion. At the saloon, men argued over whether the cowboy would truly follow the law or eventually leave. Women whispered about how rare it was to see sisters so united instead of divided. Even the elders, who had enforced the law for generations, wondered if the cowboy's presence might breathe new life into an old tradition. But not everyone wished him well. A wealthy rancher from the neighboring valley who had long admired the sisters' land began stirring trouble. He mocked the cowboy, saying no man could bear such a life. He told others the cowboy would eventually betray the sisters, leaving them broken. Some townsfolk began to doubt, wondering if the stranger was truly strong enough to honor such a heavy tradition. The cowboy heard these whispers, and they cut deep. But he refused to answer with anger. Instead, he worked harder, showing through his actions that he was not a man who ran from responsibility. Slowly, his steady nature won over more of the town. Children waved when they saw him ride by. Farmers asked his help with their animals. Even the innkeeper, once cautious, began calling him our cowboy. One evening, the old ranch hand returned to speak with him. They sat under the stars, the crackle of a fire between them. "You've done well," the old man said, nodding. "But remember, strength is not only in your arms. It is in your heart. These sisters need more than a worker. They need a man who can guide them through storms. Are you ready for that?" The cowboy stared at the flames and nodded slowly. "I don't know if I am ready," he admitted. "But I know I won't run. I'll stand with them." The sisters, true to their word, never let jealousy rise between them. If one spent time with the cowboy, the others respected it. If he praised one, the others did not take offense. Instead, they supported each other, reminding the cowboy that he was not choosing among them, he was joining them. It was a lesson that humbled him and made him admire them even more. Yet, despite the harmony they built, the cowboy's heart still wrestled with doubt. Late at night, he lay awake asking himself if love could truly be shared without breaking apart. Could 3 hearts and 1 heart beat together in peace? He did not have the answer, but he trusted that time and loyalty would reveal it. One day, as he and the youngest sister raced across the hills, she suddenly stopped her horse and turned serious. "Cowboy," she said, her voice steady, "you're scared, aren't you?" He hesitated, then nodded. She gave a small smile. "Good, only fools aren't scared. But don't let fear stop you. Fear is like the wind. It can push you back or it can push you forward. You must decide." Her words stayed with him. That night, he looked at the 3 sisters sitting together, laughing and talking as they shared supper. He realized something important. He did not need to have all the answers. He only needed to stay, to keep working, to keep respecting them, and to keep walking the path laid before him. Love, like the land, would grow if tended with patience. And so, the cowboy's story moved into a new chapter, not one of running or choosing, but of learning. Learning to carry not just his own heart but the hearts of others, bound together by an ancient law and the unbreakable bond of sisters. The town still whispered and challenges still waited ahead, but for now the cowboy found peace in one truth. He was no longer a wanderer. He was part of something larger, something older, and something stronger than himself. The sun rose over the Wild West town, casting long shadows across the wooden houses and the dusty road. The cowboy stood outside the ranch that had now become his home, staring into the distance as his horse grazed nearby. He had been living under the weight of the ancient law for weeks, and while he had accepted its meaning, he knew the real test was still ahead. People in town had stopped whispering quietly and now spoke openly about him. Some admired his courage while others doubted his strength. Everyone knew it would not be long before the elders demanded a final decision. Inside the ranch house, the sisters were talking quietly over breakfast. The eldest had her arms crossed, her eyes serious. "The council will call us soon," she said. "They want answers. They want to know what future we are building." The middle sister stirred her cup of coffee, her face calm but thoughtful. "The cowboy is trying, but the whole town is watching him. It isn't fair that one man must carry so much." The youngest leaned back in her chair with her usual fire. "He'll stand tall. He's stronger than anyone gives him credit for. But when the council calls, we must stand with him. He cannot face them alone." That afternoon, a boy from the town came riding fast on a small horse, dust flying behind him. He carried a note from the elders. The council was calling a public gathering in 3 days' time. The cowboy read the message with steady eyes, but inside his heart pounded. This was the moment when the tradition would no longer be whispers or private talks. It would become a public choice, one that would affect not only his life but also the lives of the sisters and the future of the ranch. The next 3 days were heavy with silence. The cowboy worked harder than ever, fixing fences and guiding cattle, as though his hands could quiet his restless mind. The eldest sister stayed close to him, reminding him of the importance of strength and leadership. The middle sister offered comfort, her kindness helping him breathe when the burden felt too heavy. The youngest teased him into laughing, telling him not to let fear break his spirit. Together they gave him courage in different ways, but the decision was still his to make. On the morning of the gathering, the town square was filled with people. Men leaned against wooden posts, women stood in clusters, and children whispered with wide eyes. The cowboy arrived with the 3 sisters by his side, each of them holding their heads high. The council of elders sat on a long bench, their faces weathered and stern. The oldest elder rose to speak, his deep voice echoing through the crowd. "Stranger," he said, "you have come into this land and into this family. You know the law. By our ancient custom, you cannot choose one sister and leave the others. You must honor them all or you must walk away." The cowboy stood tall, his hat in his hands. He looked around at the crowd, then at the 3 sisters beside him. He thought of the long rides, the laughter, the quiet evenings by the fire, the work they had done together and the bond they had shown him. He took a deep breath. "I will not divide this family," he said firmly. "I do not yet know how a man can walk such a path, but I know I will not bring harm to these sisters. I will honor your law and I will honor them." The crowd erupted in mixed voices, some cheering, some gasping, some murmuring with disbelief. The sisters exchanged looks of relief, their hearts lifted by his courage. The eldest placed a hand gently on his arm, steadying him. The middle smiled with quiet pride. The youngest grinned widely, as though she had always known he would rise to the challenge. But not everyone accepted it. The wealthy rancher from the neighboring valley, the one who had always wanted the sisters' land, stepped forward angrily. "This is madness," he shouted. "No man can keep such a promise. He will fail, and when he does, your law will break with him." His words stirred unease in the crowd, and some nodded in agreement. The council looked uncertain, glancing among themselves. The cowboy did not answer with anger. Instead, he spoke calmly. "A man's strength is not measured by how many cattle he owns or how much land he claims. It is measured by his word, by his loyalty, and by the way he treats those under his care. I may not be a rich man, but I will not break my word. I will stand by these sisters as long as they allow me." His words silenced the rancher, though the man's face burned with rage. The council, after a long moment, nodded in agreement. The oldest elder raised his hand. "So be it. You have spoken your choice before the people. From this day forward, you are bound to this family by our law. May you honor them, and may they honor you." The gathering ended, and the people slowly dispersed, still murmuring. Some doubted, but others admired the cowboy more than ever. The sisters walked beside him back to the ranch, their steps light, though the road ahead was uncertain. The eldest finally broke the silence. "You spoke well," she said, her voice calm. The middle added softly, "You were brave." The youngest grinned. "And you made that rancher choke on his words. That's worth celebrating." That evening, the four of them sat on the porch watching the sun sink behind the hills. The air was warm and the land glowed golden. For the first time in weeks, the cowboy felt a sense of peace. The law was no longer a shadow hanging over him. It was now part of his life. Yet he knew that peace would not last forever. Challenges would come. Doubt would return. But he also knew something stronger. He was not alone. The sisters were with him, and together they could face whatever storm the Wild West would throw their way. As the stars appeared, the eldest sister spoke again. "This is only the beginning. The law has been honored, but now we must prove to ourselves and to the town that it can truly work." The middle sister nodded. "We will need patience, kindness, and strength." The youngest leaned forward, her eyes shining with fire. "And laughter. Don't forget laughter." The cowboy smiled, feeling something he had not felt in a long time, a sense of belonging. For years he had been a wanderer, moving from town to town, never staying long enough to put down roots. Now in this place with these sisters and under this law, he had found not only a home but a purpose. He was no longer just a stranger. He was part of a family, bound by tradition and by choice. And so the story of the cowboy and the sisters moved into a new chapter. The town still whispered, and the wealthy rancher still plotted, but the bond between the cowboy and the sisters had been sealed in front of all. Out in the Wild West, where the land was harsh and life was uncertain, that bond would be tested many times. But for now, under the stars and in the glow of the fire, they sat together as one, ready to face the future hand in hand. The days after the town gathering felt lighter, but the cowboy knew the weight of his promise was only beginning. People treated him differently now. Some greeted him with respect, calling him a man of honor, while others looked at him with doubt, whispering that he would never keep such a vow. The sisters noticed too, but instead of letting it trouble them, they stood close by his side. They had made a choice as much as he had, to live not divided but together, to show the world that love could be stronger than gossip and tradition. Life on the ranch carried on. The cowboy woke before dawn each day, saddled his horse, and rode the pastures to check on the cattle. The eldest sister often joined him, her sharp eyes noticing broken fences and weak spots in the land. She spoke with calm authority, and he admired her wisdom. She carried the weight of responsibility as though it had always been hers. When they worked side by side, he felt like they were partners not just in labor but in leadership. The middle sister cared for the animals in the household with a gentle hand. She often prepared food for the workers, sewed torn clothes, and tended to sick calves. The cowboy would sometimes find her in the barn, softly humming a tune while stroking a horse's mane. Her presence calmed him, reminding him that life was not only about hard work and heavy decisions, but also about kindness in small moments. The youngest was always full of fire, riding fast across the hills, laughing even when chores were difficult. She challenged the cowboy to races, teased him when he was too serious, and reminded him that joy was as important as duty. At first he thought her laughter was lighthearted, but he soon realized it was her strength. It kept the shadows of doubt from growing too strong. Together, the three sisters balanced one another, and the cowboy began to see that the ancient law had not been created from foolishness, but from wisdom. It was not meant to trap love, but to protect the unity of family. He understood now that his task was not to divide his heart, but to grow it, to make space for each of them without letting jealousy or unfairness take root. It was not easy, but he had faced storms before. This was simply a storm of the heart. The town watched closely. At first, many expected quarrels and rivalry, but when none came, their whispers began to soften. Farmers noticed how the cowboy worked tirelessly on the ranch, never asking for more than what was fair. Women noticed how the sisters stayed united, never speaking ill of one another, always supporting one another. Children admired the cowboy's calm strength and followed him around, asking him to tell stories of the open land. Slowly, the town's doubt began to turn into respect. But the wealthy rancher who had once shouted against the cowboy still carried bitterness in his heart. He spread rumors saying the cowboy was pretending, that no man could keep such a promise forever. He waited for mistakes, ready to strike when the family showed weakness, yet every time he tried, he was met with disappointment. The cowboy did not break his word. The sisters did not fight among themselves. Instead, they grew stronger. The ranch flourished, the cattle grew healthy, and the family bond held firm. One evening, the town held a festival. Music filled the air and lanterns glowed across the streets. People danced, children played, and the smell of roasted meat drifted through the square. The cowboy attended with the sisters, walking beside them proudly. For the first time, the town welcomed him fully. Men shook his hand, women smiled warmly, and even the elders nodded with quiet approval. The sisters laughed together, their bond clear to all who watched. It was at that festival that the cowboy realized something important. He was no longer an outsider. He had become part of the community. Later that night, as the music slowed and the stars filled the sky, the eldest sister spoke softly to him. "You kept your word, cowboy, not only to us but to the whole town." The middle sister smiled gently. "You gave people hope that love can be more than choosing. It can be sharing." The youngest, with her usual fire, added, "And you proved that tradition doesn't have to be a chain. It can be a torch that lights the way." The cowboy listened, his heart full. For years he had wandered from place to place, never staying long enough to belong anywhere. He had carried his past like a shadow, always afraid of being tied down. But here with these sisters he had found something he never expected. Not just love, but a home, a purpose, and a family. The months that followed brought new challenges. Storms swept across the plains, threatening the cattle. A wildfire broke out one summer night, and the cowboy fought alongside the sisters to save the ranch, their teamwork stronger than ever. There were hard times, yes, but every test only proved what they already knew, that together, they could withstand anything. The wealthy rancher eventually gave up his bitterness, realizing that his words no longer had power. The town had embraced the cowboy and the sisters as a living example of strength and harmony. Stories of their unusual bond spread far, carried by travelers who passed through. Some laughed at the tale. Some shook their heads, but others admired it, saying it showed a rare kind of courage. In time, the cowboy and the sisters became a legend of the Wild West. Around campfires, people told the story of the man who could not choose just one, and of the ancient law that bound him to honor them all. Some called it strange, others called it wise, but all agreed it was unforgettable. The cowboy himself never sought fame. He only wanted to keep his promise to live honestly and to protect the bond that had been entrusted to him. He rose each morning with the sun, worked the land with steady hands, and sat each evening with the sisters by the fire, grateful for the life he had found. Years later, when people looked back, they did not speak of the doubts or the whispers. They spoke of the strength, the unity, and the love that had grown under the weight of an ancient law. They spoke of the cowboy who had wandered into a small town and found not only 3 sisters but a family that changed him forever. And so, the story ended not with rivalry, not with broken promises, but with harmony. In a land known for its harsh winds and restless soil, the cowboy and the sisters stood as proof that even in the Wild West, love could be greater than choice, stronger than doubt, and lasting as the endless horizon.